Previously on The Business.
It's time to talk alternative energy. We welcome our second guest, Johan van Berg, who is the CEO of the South African Wind Energy Association. Johan, first of all, welcome to The Business. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming in studio. It always means a lot to us to have somebody in studio. I am fascinated, absolutely fascinated by wind turbines, by powering a grid with a breeze and the whole structure that goes with it. It's an enormous undertaking. First of all, tell us about the South African Wind Energy Association. What do you do?
We are the custodians of wind energy in South Africa. We try to make wind power happen, and at the moment we're fortunate to be reasonably successful in doing that. The association is about 15 years old, but practically has only had people in an office for about 3 years.
Right.
And that's coincided with this huge growth phase in South African wind power.
And it's exploding. There's just wind farms popping up everywhere. Let's go back to the beginning of that 15 years. I mean, most of us in South Africa hadn't heard of wind energy, and then all of a sudden you'd see shots overseas of these fields of turbines. How did it all come about that we've ended up getting so much wind energy sort of in our country?
Well, our regulatory regime and the way we do electricity in the country made it hard for wind power to start off with. As you know, Eskom has been responsible for almost everything in wind for a long time. And for a long time, coal was the cheapest way to generate electricity in South Africa. And in the recent past, in the last 10 years or so, a few things have come together. So the price of coal power has increased quite a lot. The price of wind power has come down quite a lot. To the extent that wind power is now cheaper, and the regulatory regime has become more integrated, so we understand what it is we need to do, and the authorities also understand it. And then, of course, there are broader, factors in play, like, for instance, the global climate change debate and global moves towards cleaner energy that have really also come to our shores. And when all those things come together, then you have what we refer to as the rocket launch after the long countdown.
What is the mechanism to generate power from wind? I know you're going to say a turbine, but are there alternatives to that?
There are all sorts of fascinating ways that people generate wind power.
Yep.
And the most simple one for people who haven't seen one is just a little bit like the thing that little boy holds out the car window and the wind turns.
Yeah, a little windmill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, that turns a turbine, which ultimately generates electricity. But there are very interesting things happening. There's a new technology coming out of Tunisia, of all places, that looks a little bit like a satellite dish and moves in different planes through the wind. And there aren't moving parts in that specific thing that captures the wind, doesn't have any impact on birds and bats and so forth. There's a Dutch company that wants to come and test a technology in South Africa where they fly glider planes in a specific pattern, and because they can go so high and they on a long cable, they can generate a lot of power because they're so high up and the wind is so strong. So there are all sorts of different ways to do it: vertical turbines, horizontal turbines, but the most usual one is the one that we see in the pictures and now also on the South African landscape.
They're incredibly beautiful things. They're also incredibly expensive, and I have to ask the question: those huge monstrosities that go up, which are beautiful once they are up, their carbon footprint is absolutely huge. I mean, they're not manufactured locally. They're put onto ships. They're put onto planes. Teams have to come out. They have to be erected with huge equipment. I've seen it firsthand. Does this in the long term get offset by the fact that it stays there for so long? How does it work?
Yeah, carbon footprint debate is one we're very happy to have with any proponent of any technology. There is international data on how long does it take to manufacture the electricity, the energy that it takes to actually put it up. So when you get into the green, just from memory, the figure is about 6 months.
That's short.
Yeah, and
really.
Then you've got it for 19 and a half years that you're actually doing something positive for the earth. Yeah.
So the expected lifespan of one of those turbines or those windmills is 20 years.
A wind farm is 20 years, and it's a little bit like an aeroplane. From time to time, you have to do major work on it, maybe every 7 or 8 years. But generally, the installation will be there for 20 years, and often you find that at the end of such a period, a new wind farm is developed with better technology.
Now, Johan, what about the internationals that have come in? I mean, there's a lot of work which goes into putting these wind farms up. And there's a lot of expertise as well. Is local training being done by international people so that eventually South Africans can own their own wind farms?
That's a very good question. I think on the ownership side already, the early pioneers were mostly South Africans, and they took in international partners when they needed the capital.
Right, right.
So I'm reasonably happy that that's already going well. And on the BEE side, a lot of very good things: community development, community involvement, and ownership in the projects. All those things are going very well. On the technical side, we had no accredited course for training wind turbine service technicians when we started out, and we went through an extensive process in the last 2 years or so. There is now a course accredited. It will kick off in 2015. The
Fantastic.
first people will be trained, and for the interim, they're being sent to Germany to get their training there.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, that's true progress in that whole field.
Yeah, the reason why government supports this so strongly, is it goes broader than just getting energy. It's around the green economy and creating, jobs and local content and so forth. And we buy 100% into that. We understand that's why that strong support is there for us. And it's something we give a lot of attention to.
What about the price of electricity? It's high. It's very high. We know there's the debate at the moment about new power plants being built. Eskom's in trouble. Let's be honest. There's too little electricity, and there's a booming middle kind of class population which is requiring that electricity. What about that? How does that all work?
Well, we have to look at the cost of electricity, and we have to have a look at the cost of not having electricity. The cost of not having it is normally between 50 and 100 times higher than actually having it.
Right.
Which means that in South Africa, we should just build all the power we possibly can and not argue too much about exactly where it comes from. In the case of wind power now, it's been procured in windows. So the third procurement round that we've just run through saw wind power cost 74 cents per kilowatt hour. And, for the public, that really means you look at all the electricity units that's produced over the 20-year lifetime and look at the cost, and then you work out the cost per unit, and the unit is a kilowatt hour. So 74 cents per kilowatt hour. If you had to compare that to the cost of the new coal power coming from the Medupi plant that Eskom is building, that's estimated to come in at about 105 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're one of the few places in the world where wind power is the cheapest source of bulk electricity available.
Johan, you can't just put one of these wind farms up, can you? It takes a lot of research and also very specific places where you can place them.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes in there, and there's a big commitment that the developer makes financially, without really knowing that anything will ever stand. So typically a developer will develop 5 or 10 sites, and they'll fall by the wayside for various reasons as you go along.
Yep.
The big things that you look at are, does the wind blow there? Are there substations or big electricity wires to export the power? What about your environmental factors? Is it a good place from an environmental perspective? What about surrounding communities, homesteads, and so forth? Logistics, you actually have to be able to get, equipment weighing more than 100 ton a piece sometimes to the specific site, roads. So it's a big commitment. Then you do an environmental impact assessment that takes the best part of a year and more. You measure the wind for a year or more, and when all that comes together, then you actually still do the finance, bid into the system and build it. So it's a good 3-4 years down the line that it actually succeeds. And as we go along, of course, some fall over. So it's a reasonably high risk investment, and therefore I'm always happy to see my colleagues who are the developers being successful.
That's fantastic, yeah. I'd like to go back to the end user. We focus on small business on this show. Obviously, that's what our core focus is. But I'd like to find out about end user power generation. When I was in the UK a few years ago, there was a big drive towards feeding back into the grid from solar power, from wind power, etc. And I know there's a lot of awareness when it comes to alternative energy sources. And I, for one, would put up my hand and be first in line if there was a solution which was given to me, especially from a wind point of view. What kind of things are developing in the end user sort of space where somebody can put up a wind turbine in their backyard, and then when it's not being used, feed back into the grid?
It's very important that we ultimately figure out how to do that. Yep. It's quite complex in the South African context, and the reason why it's complex is in South Africa the municipalities finance themselves by putting a sometimes quite large markup on electricity that they sell. And it might have been better if we designed the system over to just make that a tax. But what's happening now is that the municipalities don't necessarily, they're not incentivized for you to create your own power, because that means they lose their revenue stream.
Got you.
Yeah, so we have to find a way to finance the municipalities in another way, and then ultimately we must put the technology in place, which is called smart metering. Meter it can run forwards and run back and so on. But as we've seen the regulatory regime becoming friendly to wind power, I think at that level it's not completely there yet.
I just think it's somewhat of an answer if you can have people who are willing to generate their own electricity. The burden suddenly lifts off the grid, doesn't it? Really.
Well, what I can say is there's a pilot program in Port Elizabeth at the moment where the municipality is actually going to look at this, where people can buy not necessarily from their own rooftops, but can buy from green producers, and the municipality will not put the markup in, and they say we will just deliver the electricity to you.
Right.
And that's in the hope that they will create a green economy in that area that will make up for the shortfall in revenue then. So there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of people working on this, and I think we will figure it out.
Are you going to be joining the folks at the Africa Energy Indaba this week?
Indeed, I am, and the other thing I might mention is that Al Gore is coming to South Africa in the second week of March to come and do training around climate change, and we'll also have a presence there, and that shows that South Africa is becoming a big destination in the world in terms of renewable energy. There'll also be a session at the European Wind Energy Conference, which is a huge international event where they will talk about South Africa specifically and what's happening here.
Fantastic. How many power plants are we going to have in the next few years? I mean, sorry, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
How many wind farms are we going to have in the next few years?
Well, how many wind farms exactly is difficult to say, but at the moment we only have 8 turbines spinning in the country. By 2030 we are supposed to have probably in the proximity of 3,000 to 4,000 turbines spinning.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. I just look forward to seeing them up. I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful way of generating electricity. The final question, which I know people are going to shout at me if I don't ask, and you alluded to it earlier, is the environmental impact from a bird life point of view and from bats, etc. This is something that cannot be ignored. Talk us through it.
Yes, if you build a wind farm, or you do an environmental impact assessment, and you appoint an independent consultant that then appoints such specialist consultants as may be required, and a bird and a bat consultant are invariably are amongst those.
Yes.
So we are very close to BirdLife South Africa. We have a code of conduct for the development of wind farms, and we see a synergy ultimately that climate change is as bad for birds as it is for many other things, and therefore they want us to be successful, and we want to operate in a way that's acceptable to the bird lovers, which we also are.
Sure.
So it's a big country with a large landmass. I don't think we ever have to build a wind farm in a highly contentious place.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great answer. Johan, let's leave it there. It's such a fascinating topic. I could ask you really, really kind of fine-tuned questions the whole day. I think it's really brilliant. But just generally, I hope that it's a massive success. And I hope we see more and more of these wind farms going up. And I hope into Africa as well. I think it's something that can solve a lot of problems. Johan van der Berg, the CEO of the South African Wind Energy Association, we thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. There you go. So if you've ever wanted to know more. Oh, before you go, have you got a website which we can log on to?
Yes, that's www.sawea.org.za.
All right, Sawea, SAWEA.org.za. That stands for the South African Wind Energy Association. Thank you, Johan, for your time.
Thank you.
The Business on balls.co.za. Brought to you by FNB Business Banking.